What happens when you think you're in control, but the person you betray turns the tables without a word? How can one joke about wanting other men end with a lawyer at your door and your family divided? This is the story of the day my husband decided I was free, just not in the way I expected. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The dining room felt suffocating that evening, even with all of us gathered around the mahogany table Mark had insisted on buying 3 years ago. The overhead chandelier cast warm light across our faces, but the atmosphere was anything but cozy. Mark sat at the head of the table, methodically cutting his steak, while our 4-year-old daughter Sophie pushed peas around her plate with the focused determination only toddlers possess. Mark's mother Gloria sat to his right, her silver hair perfectly styled as always, discussing her book club's latest selection with my mother Ruth, who nodded politely while stealing glances at her phone. Mark's younger brother Sam had joined us tonight, fresh from his latest business trip, regaling us with stories about difficult clients and delayed flights. I felt invisible. Again. Mark hadn't looked at me properly in weeks, maybe months. When was the last time he'd complimented me? When had he last shown any real interest in my day, my thoughts, my dreams? I was 32 years old, not dead, yet I felt like I was fading into the beige wallpaper of our suburban existence. You know what's funny? I said suddenly, my voice cutting through Sam's story about airport security. Everyone turned to look at me, and for a moment, I felt that rush of attention I'd been craving. I was at the grocery store today, and this guy, probably mid-30s, really handsome, he was flirting with me. Actually flirting. It felt nice to be noticed. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie continued eating, oblivious, but I could see Gloria's fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Ruth shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mark's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't look up from his plate. I continued, emboldened by the reaction. When was the last time anyone here made me feel desirable? Sometimes a girl needs to know she's still got it, you know. I saw ya, Ruth said quietly, her voice carrying a warning. But I was on a roll now. The wine had loosened my tongue, and Mark's continued silence only fueled my frustration. What? I'm just being honest. I'm not saying I'd do anything about it, but it's nice to have options, to know that other men find me attractive. Gloria set down her fork with a sharp clink against her china plate. That's quite enough, young lady. Quite enough of what? I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my own ears. Quite enough honesty. Quite enough reality. Sorry if my feelings make everyone uncomfortable. Mark finally looked at me then, and something in his eyes made my stomach clench. It wasn't anger that I could have handled. It was something colder, more final. Excuse me, he said quietly, standing from the table. I've lost my appetite. He walked out of the dining room, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. A moment later, I heard his office door close. Well, that went well, Sam muttered, reaching for his wineglass. I saw ya, honey, Ruth said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Maybe you should apologize. You know Mark loves you. Does he? I snapped, pulling my hand away. When's the last time he showed it? When's the last time he looked at me like I was more than just the person who does his laundry and raises his child? Gloria's face had turned an alarming shade of red. How dare you speak about my son that way? Mark works 60 hours a week to provide for this family. He comes home to you every night. He's faithful, responsible, and devoted. What more do you want? I want to feel alive. The words burst out of me before I could stop them. I want passion, excitement, romance. I want to feel like a woman, not just a wife and mother. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you got married, Gloria said icily. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Sam made a few attempts at small talk, but they fell flat. Sophie sensed the tension and became fussy, asking for Daddy. Ruth kept shooting me looks that clearly said, "Fix this," while Gloria maintained a stony silence that spoke volumes. After everyone left, I found myself alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher and replaying the evening in my mind. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I should apologize to Mark. But then I thought about Tyler Jensen, my old college flame who'd been texting me lately, and how he made me laugh, how he remembered little things about me that Mark had long since forgotten. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Tyler's contact. Before I could second-guess myself, I typed, "You should have seen Mark's face tonight. I think I might have finally gotten his attention." The message sent before I could delete it. 3 dots appeared immediately, indicating Tyler was typing back. "What did you do, troublemaker?" came his response, followed by a winking emoji. I smiled for the first time all evening. At least someone appreciated my honesty. Upstairs, Mark was already in bed, his back turned to my side. The space between us felt like an ocean. "Mark," I whispered into the darkness. No response. "I was just trying to get a reaction from you. You've been so distant lately." Still nothing. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd pushed too hard. But as Tyler's texts continued throughout the night, funny observations about his day, memories of our college adventures, compliments about photos I'd posted on social media. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt wanted. The Riverside Cafe had become my sanctuary over the past few weeks. Tucked away on a quiet side street downtown, it was the perfect place for private conversations and stolen moments. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting everything in a golden glow that made even mundane Tuesday feel special. I'd been meeting Tyler here regularly, always under the guise of work meetings or errands. Today, he sat across from me in our usual corner booth, his dark hair catching the light as he laughed at something on his phone. "You're terrible," he said, shaking his head as he read my latest text thread with Sarah, my best friend, who'd been encouraging my newfound rebellion. "Poor Mark doesn't know what hit him." "Poor Mark." I raised an eyebrow. "Poor Mark hasn't touched me in 3 months. Poor Mark comes home, eats dinner, watches TV, and goes to bed. Poor Mark treats me like a roommate who happens to share his last name." Tyler reached across the table and covered my hand with his. The contact sent electricity up my arm, something I hadn't felt with Mark in years. "You deserve better than that, Euphoria. You always did." His thumb traced small circles on my palm, and I felt myself melting into the familiar comfort of being truly seen, truly appreciated. This was what I'd been missing. This connection, this spark, this feeling of being alive. My phone buzzed against the table. Mark's name flashed on the screen. "Where are you? Sophie's asking for you." I stared at the message, guilt and irritation warring in my chest. Of course Sophie was asking for me. I was always the one who handled everything. Bedtime stories, scraped knees, homework help. When did Mark ever step up without being asked? "Work running late," I typed back, glancing at Tyler, who was watching me with an amused expression. "Lying to your husband now?" he asked, but his tone was playful, not judgmental. "It's not really lying. I am working on figuring out what I want from my life." Tyler's smile faltered slightly. "And what do you want, Euphoria?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I knew what he was really asking. I knew what my answer might lead to. But sitting there, feeling desired and appreciated for the first time in months, I couldn't bring myself to care about the consequences. "I want to feel like myself again," I said softly. "I want to remember what it's like to be wanted." Before Tyler could respond, my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, girl," I answered, grateful for the interruption. "How's your coffee date going?" Sarah's voice was bright with mischief. She was the only one who knew about my meetings with Tyler, and she'd been nothing but supportive. "It's going well, very well." Good for you. You deserve some happiness, Euphoria. Mark's had you on autopilot for too long. Tyler grinned at me across the table, clearly able to hear Sarah's side of the conversation. I should probably head home soon, I said, though I made no move to leave. Why? Let Mark handle dinner for once. Let him figure out Sophie's bedtime routine. You've earned a break. After I hung up, Tyler leaned back in his seat, studying me with those dark eyes that had first captured my attention in Professor Morrison's psychology class 15 years ago. She's right, you know. You do deserve happiness. It's complicated, Tyler. I have Sophie to think about. And Mark, despite everything, he's not a bad man. He's just boring. I laughed despite myself. That's harsh, but accurate. Before I could answer, I noticed a familiar figure at the counter ordering coffee. My heart stopped. Sam, Mark's brother, stood with his back to us, but I'd recognize that expensive suit anywhere. He turned slightly, scanning the cafe for a place to sit, and our eyes met across the room. The expression on his face shifted from surprise to something else. Understanding, disappointment, maybe even pity. He nodded once in acknowledgement, then took his coffee and left without approaching our table. Shit, I muttered under my breath. What's wrong? Tyler followed my gaze to the door where Sam had just exited. That was Mark's brother. He saw us. Tyler shrugged. So, you're allowed to have coffee with friends. But I knew Sam wasn't stupid. He'd seen the way Tyler was holding my hand, the intimate way we were leaning toward each other. He'd seen the guilt written all over my face. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, but I recognized Sam's writing style immediately. I think you should know what's going on. My blood ran cold. He was texting Mark. Right now, probably, telling him about seeing me with another man, about the way we looked together. I have to go, I said, grabbing my purse and standing so quickly I nearly knocked over my coffee cup. Euphoria, wait. But I was already rushing toward the door, my heart pounding as I imagined the conversation happening between the brothers. Sam had always been loyal to Mark, always the responsible one. There was no way he'd keep this to himself. The drive home felt endless. Every red light, every slow driver ahead of me felt like torture. I needed to get home before Sam's message sank in, needed to control the narrative before Mark could draw his own conclusions. But when I pulled into our driveway, Mark's car was already there, and through the living room window, I could see him pacing while talking on the phone. I sat in my car for a moment, watching my husband through the glass, and realized that something fundamental had shifted. The game I thought I was playing, the harmless flirtation, the innocent meetings, had suddenly become very real, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the consequences. The insurance office buzzed with its usual Tuesday morning energy, but I couldn't concentrate on the claim files stacked on my desk. My computer screen showed 17 unread emails, but all I could think about was the look on Mark's face when I'd finally gone inside last night. He'd been waiting in the kitchen, phone still in his hand, his expression unreadable. Sam says he saw you at the Riverside Cafe today, he'd said without preamble. Yes, I had a meeting there. Work stuff. The lie had rolled off my tongue so easily it scared me. With Tyler Jensen? The fact that he knew Tyler's name had caught me off guard. How do you... I'm not stupid, Euphoria. I've seen the way you light up when you text. I've noticed you working late more often. I've watched you pulling away from me, from Sophie, from our family. But then Sophie had wandered downstairs asking for water, and the conversation had died. Mark had handled bedtime while I'd hidden in our bedroom, deleting some of my more incriminating texts with Tyler while leaving others that seemed innocent enough. Now, sitting at my desk trying to focus on Mrs. Patterson's fender-bender claim, I felt my phone buzz. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. Thinking about you. Last night was amazing. I glanced around the office, making sure no one was watching, then typed back, "It was just coffee, Tyler. The best coffee of my life. When can I see you again?" Before I could respond, My supervisor, Janet, appeared at my cubicle. "Isoria, could I see you in my office for a moment?" My stomach dropped. Had someone seen Tyler's text? Had Mark called my work? I followed Janet down the hall, my mind racing through possibilities. "I wanted to discuss your recent performance," Janet said once we were seated in her cluttered office. "Your productivity has dropped significantly over the past month. You've been leaving early, taking extended lunch breaks, and several clients have complained about delayed responses." Relief flooded through me. This wasn't about Tyler. "I'm sorry, Janet. I've been dealing with some personal issues, but I'll do better." "I hope so. You're usually one of our most reliable adjusters, but lately—" She shrugged. "Just get back on track, okay?" I nodded and returned to my desk, but Janet's words stung. Was I really letting my marriage problems affect my work? Was I jeopardizing everything for a few stolen hours with Tyler? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark. "Can we talk tonight, after Sophie goes to bed?" The formal tone of his text made my chest tight. This was it, the conversation I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. "Of course," I replied, then immediately texted Tyler. "Can't meet this week. Family stuff." His response came quickly. "Everything okay? You seem stressed." "Just need some space to think." "About us?" I stared at the question for a long time. About us. Was there an us? What exactly was I doing with Tyler? What did I want from him, from Mark, from my life? The rest of the workday crawled by. I managed to complete 2 claim reviews and return several client calls, but my heart wasn't in it. Every few minutes I found myself checking my phone, reading and rereading Mark's text, trying to decipher what he might say tonight. When I finally got home, the house felt different. Mark was in the kitchen making dinner, something he rarely did on weekdays. Sophie was at the table coloring, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Mommy," she squealed when she saw me, abandoning her crayons to run into my arms. I hugged her tight, breathing in her little girl scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dirt. This was what mattered. This was what I stood to lose if I kept down this path with Tyler. "How was school, baby?" I asked, settling her back at the table. "We learned about butterflies. Did you know they start as caterpillars and then they get in a cocoon and change into something completely different?" "That's called metamorphosis," Mark said from the stove, his voice carefully neutral. "Sometimes change is necessary for growth." I caught the underlying message in his words and felt my cheeks flush. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Mark had made my favorite pasta dish, and we talked about Sophie's school project, weekend plans, and normal family stuff. For a moment, I could almost pretend nothing had changed between us. But after Sophie was tucked into bed, the artificial normalcy evaporated. "We need to discuss what's happening," Mark said as we settled in the living room. He sat in his usual chair while I took the couch, the coffee table between us feeling like a chasm. "What do you mean?" I asked, though we both knew exactly what he meant. "Tyler Jensen, the late nights, the distance between us, the way you talked at dinner last week about other men finding you attractive." His voice remained calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I need to know where we stand, Isoria." "Nothing's happened," I said quickly. "Tyler and I are just friends, old friends catching up." "Are you happy in our marriage?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. It's complicated, Mark. It's a yes or no question." I stared at him, this man I'd married 8 years ago, this father of my child, this person who knew me better than anyone else in the world, and I realized I didn't know how to answer. "I love you," I said finally, "but I feel invisible. I feel like we're roommates, not lovers. When's the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, like you did when we were dating?" "When's the last time you gave me a chance to?" he countered. "You've been pulling away for months, Isoria. Every time I try to connect with you, you're on your phone or making plans to go out, or complaining about something I've done wrong. That's not fair. isn't it? He leaned forward, and for the first time in weeks, I had his full attention. I work hard to provide for this family. I come home every night. I help with Sophie when you ask. I don't go out drinking with friends or disappear for hours without explanation. What more do you want from me? The same question Tyler had asked me at the cafe, but coming from Mark, it sounded different, more desperate, more final. I want passion, I whispered. I want romance. I want to feel like we're in love, not just going through the motions. Mark was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. Can I see your phone? The request hit me like a physical blow. What? Your phone. If nothing's happening with Tyler, if you're just friends, then you won't mind showing me your messages. My mouth went dry. I thought about the deleted texts, the flirty conversations, the plans we'd made to meet. Even with the most incriminating evidence erased, there was still enough to damn me. That's crazy, Mark. You want to spy on me now? I want to trust my wife, but trust requires transparency. I stood up abruptly, clutching my phone to my chest. I can't believe you're asking me this. What's next, tracking my location, going through my emails? Isoria. No, this conversation is over. I'm going to bed. I stormed upstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. In our bedroom, I locked the door and immediately opened my messages with Tyler. There were dozens of them, flirty, intimate, definitely crossing lines that a married woman shouldn't cross. I started deleting them, one by one, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the phone. Even as I erased the evidence, I knew it was too late. Mark's suspicions were confirmed by my refusal to show him the messages. My guilt was written all over my face. When I finally unlocked the bedroom door an hour later, Mark was nowhere to be found. His pillow and blanket were missing from our bed. He was sleeping in the guest room. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Gloria's house always smelled like vanilla candles and disapproval, but tonight the scent seemed particularly suffocating. The monthly family dinner had been a tradition for years, but as I walked through her perfectly decorated living room toward the dining room, I felt like I was walking to my execution. Mark had barely spoken to me in the 3 days since our confrontation about my phone. He'd slept in the guest room, communicated through Sophie when necessary, and maintained a polite but distant demeanor that was somehow worse than outright anger. Isoria, dear, Gloria said as I entered the dining room, her voice dripping with false sweetness. How lovely that you could join us tonight. The emphasis on could wasn't lost on anyone. Ruth, my mother, gave me an encouraging smile from across the table, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Sam was already seated, studiously avoiding eye contact, while Mark helped Sophie into her booster seat. Sorry I'm late, I said, taking my usual spot. Work was crazy today. Work, Gloria repeated as if the word tasted bitter. Yes, I imagine it must be very demanding. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Did she know? Had Mark told her about Tyler, about our fight? Dinner started normally enough. Gloria served her famous pot roast while Ruth complimented the new curtains. Sophie chatted about her upcoming school play, and Sam discussed his latest business trip. But I could feel the undercurrent of tension, the way conversation stopped when I entered them, the meaningful glances exchanged over my head. So, Isoria, Gloria said as she refilled wine glasses, Mark tells me you've been reconnecting with old friends lately. There it was. My stomach clenched, but I forced my voice to remain steady. A few people from college, yes. It's nice to catch up. How nice, she said, settling back into her chair. And how does Tyler Jensen fit into that? Such an interesting name. Didn't you date him before Mark? The room fell silent except for Sophie's humming as she played with her food. Ruth's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and Sam suddenly became very interested in his wine glass. Tyler's an old friend, I said carefully. We've had coffee a few times to catch up, that's all. Coffee? Gloria nodded sagely. Of course, just coffee. How innocent. Mom, Mark said quietly, but there was no real rebuke in his voice. What? Gloria spread her hands innocently. I'm just making conversation. Surely there's nothing wrong with discussing Isoria's friendships. Something snapped inside me. The condescension, the judgment, the way she said friendships like it was something dirty, it all bubbled up into a rage I couldn't contain. You know what, Gloria? You're right. Let's discuss my friendships. Let's talk about how nice it is to spend time with someone who actually listens when I speak, someone who remembers things I've said, someone who makes me feel like I'm worth more than just cooking and cleaning and childcare. Ruth made a small sound of distress, but I was on a roll now. Let's talk about how refreshing it is to have a conversation with a man who finds me interesting, who compliments me, who makes me laugh, someone who sees me as a woman, not just a wife and mother. Isoria, Ruth said urgently, maybe we should— No, Mom, I'm tired of pretending everything's perfect. I'm tired of sitting here every month listening to Gloria criticize everything I do, while Mark sits there saying nothing. You want to know about Tyler? Fine. He makes me feel alive. He makes me remember who I used to be before I became invisible in my own marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie had stopped humming and was looking around the table with wide, confused eyes. Sam was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Ruth looked like she might cry. And Mark was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something colder, something final. Well, Gloria said, her voice shaking with barely contained fury, I think we all know where we stand now. Do we? I laughed, but it sounded hysterical even to my own ears. Because I've been trying to figure out where I stand for months. Am I a wife, a roommate, a live-in nanny? Because I sure don't feel like a partner. You feel like a selfish, ungrateful woman who doesn't appreciate what she has, Gloria snapped, her composure finally cracking. My son works himself to death for you and Sophie. He provides a beautiful home, financial security, stability. And this is how you repay him, by flaunting your affair. It's not an affair, I shouted, standing so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. We've had coffee, we've talked, I stopped myself before I could say more, but the damage was done. Everyone at the table was staring at me now, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. We've what, Isoria? Mark asked quietly. His voice was deadly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. Nothing, we haven't done anything. But you want to, he said. It wasn't a question. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. I did want to. I wanted Tyler to kiss me, to hold me, to make me feel desired and beautiful and alive. I wanted to feel something other than the crushing mundanity of my daily existence. I think, Mark said, standing slowly, it's time we were honest. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling through something before setting it on the table. Sam sent me this yesterday. I looked at the screen and felt the blood drain from my face. It was a photo, clearly taken from across the Riverside Cafe, showing Tyler and me at our usual table. His hand was covering mine, and we were leaning toward each other intimately. To anyone looking at the picture, we looked like lovers. That's not what it looks like, I said weakly. Isn't it? Mark picked up the phone and scrolled to something else. What about this? Another photo, this one showing Tyler walking me to my car, his hand on the small of my back as he leaned in to whisper something in my ear. I remembered that moment. He'd been telling me how beautiful I looked, how lucky Mark was to have me. I'd felt so alive, so desired. Now, looking at the photo, I could see how it appeared to everyone else. Mark, I started, but he held up a hand to stop me. I'm done, Isoria. I'm done pretending this marriage is working. I'm done pretending you're happy. I'm done pretending I can compete with whatever fantasy Tyler represents. It's not a fantasy. Then what is it? His voice rose for the first time, causing Sophie to whimper. What is it, Isoria? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife is having an emotional affair with her ex-boyfriend and humiliating our family in the process. Ruth was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Gloria sat rigid in her chair, her face a mask of disgust. Sam had his arm around Sophie, who was starting to cry because the adults were yelling. "I never meant for it to go this far," I whispered, "but it did go this far, and now we all have to live with the consequences." Mark walked around the table and scooped Sophie into his arms. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go home." "What about Mommy?" Sophie asked, looking back at me over Mark's shoulder. "Mommy will be along later," he said, but something in his tone suggested he wasn't sure that was true. After they left, the remaining four of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Gloria spoke. "I hope you're proud of yourself, young lady. You've destroyed a good man and broken up a family for what? Some excitement, some adventure." "You don't understand," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "I understand perfectly. You're a spoiled, selfish woman who doesn't appreciate what she has, and now you're going to lose it all." Ruth tried to defend me, tried to smooth things over, but I could see in her eyes that she was ashamed of me too. Even my own mother couldn't justify what I'd done. I left Gloria's house that night knowing that something irreversible had happened. The careful facade of my marriage had crumbled in front of our families, and there was no putting it back together. When I got home, Mark was waiting in the living room with a folder in his hands and an expression I'd never seen before. "We need to talk," he said, and I knew that, this time, there would be no going back. The law office of Henderson and Associates felt like a foreign planet. I'd never been in a lawyer's office before, never imagined I'd need one. The mahogany furniture and leather-bound books lining the walls seemed designed to intimidate, and as I sat across from Mark and his attorney, James Henderson, I felt smaller than I had in years. "I don't understand why we need lawyers," I said for the third time since arriving. "We can work this out ourselves. We're adults." Mark's expression remained impassive. Over the past week, since the disaster at Gloria's house, he'd become a stranger. Gone was the man who'd begged me to show him my phone, who'd pleaded for honesty and transparency. In his place sat someone cold and calculating, someone who spoke only when necessary, and looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. "Mrs. Vale," James Henderson said, his voice professionally sympathetic, "your husband has asked me to handle this matter to ensure everything is done properly and legally. It's better for everyone involved." "Handle what matter?" I asked, though a growing dread in my stomach suggested I already knew. Mark slid a manila folder across the polished conference table. "Open it." My hands shook as I lifted the cover. The first page was a printed email thread between Tyler and me, dating back 6 weeks. My heart stopped as I read my own words. "Mark doesn't understand me the way you do. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together." "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "Your work computer," Henderson said matter-of-factly. "Company policy allows for monitoring of employee communications. Your supervisor was very cooperative when we explained the situation." I flipped to the next page and found bank statements highlighting charges I'd made at the Riverside Cafe, always during work hours, always on days when I'd told Mark I was busy with claims. The pattern was damning. 17 meetings over 2 months, each one carefully documented. "This is insane," I said, my voice rising. "You're spying on me now, going through my work emails, having me followed." "I'm protecting my interests," Mark replied calmly, "and Sophie's interests." The next pages showed text message logs. Somehow they'd recovered even the messages I'd deleted. Reading them now, in this sterile office environment, I could see how they looked to an outside observer. The flirtation was obvious, the emotional intimacy undeniable. "Tyler, I can't stop thinking about our afternoon together. You look so beautiful." "Isoria, I felt like myself again, like the woman I used to be before I became just a wife and mother." "Tyler, you deserve so much more than what you have. You deserve to be cherished." "Isoria, sometimes I lie awake at night, wondering what my life would be like if I'd made different choices. Each message felt like a knife twist. Had I really written these things? Had I really been so careless, so cruel? I never slept with him, I said desperately. It was just talking, just friendship. Emotional infidelity is still infidelity, Mrs. Vale, Henderson said gently. And according to these messages, it was progressing towards something physical. He was right. In the most recent exchanges, Tyler had been pushing for more intimate meetings. He'd suggested weekend trips, overnight stays, opportunities for us to explore our connection without the constraints of my marriage. I'd been tempted. God help me, I'd been seriously considering it. "What do you want from me?" I asked Mark directly, ignoring the lawyer. "I want a divorce," he said simply. "I want primary custody of Sophie, and I want to make sure this never happens again." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You can't take Sophie from me. I'm her mother." "You're a mother who's been prioritizing her affair over her child's well-being," Henderson interjected. "Look at page 15. I flipped through the documents until I found a detailed timeline showing how my meetings with Tyler had coincided with missed school events, forgotten appointments, and evenings when I'd left Sophie with babysitters while claiming to work late. October 3rd. Sophie's school play. Missed due to work emergency. Bank records show payment at Riverside Cafe during performance time. October 10th. Parent-teacher conference. Rescheduled twice due to client meetings. Text messages show Tyler meeting planned for same time. October 17th. Sophie's doctor appointment. Late arrival. Rushed examination. Cafe receipt timestamped 30 minutes before appointment. The pattern continued for pages. Each entry showed how my obsession with Tyler had pulled me away from my daughter, how I'd chosen my own desires over her needs. I made some mistakes, I admitted, tears starting to flow. But I love Sophie. I would never hurt her. "You already have hurt her," Mark said, and for the first time, emotion crept into his voice. "She's been asking why Mommy doesn't tuck her in anymore, why Mommy is always on her phone, why Mommy and Daddy don't hug like other parents do." The guilt crashed over me like a tsunami. I thought about Sophie's confused face at Gloria's dinner table, the way she'd looked between Mark and me like she was trying to solve a puzzle she was too young to understand. "I can fix this," I said frantically. "I'll stop seeing Tyler. I'll delete his number. We can go to counseling, work things out." "It's too late for that," Mark interrupted. "You made your choice, Isoria. You chose Tyler over our marriage, over our family. Now you get to live with the consequences." "But Sophie needs her mother. Sophie needs stability. She needs to know that the adults in her life will put her first. Can you honestly say you've been doing that?" I wanted to argue, to fight back, to defend myself, but looking at the evidence spread across the table, the emails, the texts, the timeline of neglect, I couldn't find the words. "What about Tyler?" I asked weakly. "What happens to him in all this?" Mark's smile was cold. "Tyler Jensen is a single man who pursued a married woman. That's between him and his conscience. But I've made sure he understands that any further contact with you will result in legal action." "You contacted Tyler?" "Mr. Henderson contacted him," Mark corrected. "Made it very clear that harassment of a married woman going through divorce proceedings could result in serious legal consequences. Apparently, Tyler decided you weren't worth the risk." The betrayal cut deep. Tyler, who'd whispered sweet words about deserving better, who'd made me feel alive and desired, had abandoned me the moment things got complicated. He'd gotten the excitement of pursuing a married woman without any of the consequences. "I want to see Sophie," I said, grasping for something, anything, to hold on to. "You'll have visitation rights," Henderson assured me. "Supervised at first, while we assess the situation. If you can prove you're prioritizing her well-being over your personal desires, we can discuss expanded custody. Supervised visitation, like I was a danger to my own child. like I was some kind of criminal who couldn't be trusted alone with my daughter. "This is crazy," I said, standing abruptly. "You're treating me like I'm some kind of monster. All I did was have coffee with an old friend. All I did was try to feel human again in a marriage that was suffocating me." "All you did," Mark said, rising to face me, "was betray your family. All you did was choose a fantasy over reality. All you did was break your daughter's heart and destroy the trust that took years to build." "I never meant—" "It doesn't matter what you meant, Isoria. It only matters what you did." I looked at this man I'd married, this father of my child, this person I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, and realized I didn't know him at all. The Mark I'd married would have fought for us, would have begged me to come back, would have tried to win me over. This Mark was done fighting. This Mark had already moved on. "The papers will be filed tomorrow," Henderson said as I gathered my purse. "You'll receive copies within the week. I'd recommend getting your own attorney." "With what money?" I asked bitterly. "Mark controls all our accounts." "You'll have access to funds for legal representation and basic living expenses," Henderson assured me. "Mr. Vale isn't trying to leave you destitute. He just wants to protect his daughter and move forward with his life." As I walked out of that office, I felt the full weight of what I'd lost crashing down on me. Not just my marriage, but my family, my home, my daily life with Sophie. I'd traded it all for a few hours of feeling desired by a man who'd disappeared the moment things got real. The freedom I'd thought I wanted felt more like exile. And I was completely, utterly alone. The family courthouse looked nothing like the dramatic courtrooms on television. Instead of soaring ceilings and ornate woodwork, it was a modest, fluorescent-lit space with beige walls and uncomfortable plastic chairs. But as I sat at the defendant's table with my court-appointed attorney, Linda Morrison, the weight of the moment felt heavier than any TV drama could convey. 3 months had passed since that devastating meeting at Henderson's office. 3 months of living in a cramped studio apartment, of supervised visits with Sophie, of watching my daughter slowly adjust to a new reality where Mommy and Daddy lived in different houses. The gavel sounded like a judge's heartbeat, flat, final, done, primary custody to Mark. Supervised visits for me, 4 hours every other Saturday, in a beige room that smelled like old crayons and broken promises. 30% of the assets, my own legal bills, mandatory therapy. No boyfriends around Sophie for at least a year. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I'd used up all my tears weeks ago. Mark didn't look triumphant when he walked past me. He looked relieved, like a man who'd finally set down something too heavy to carry anymore. "You're free now," he said, so softly only I could hear. I wanted to scream that freedom wasn't supposed to feel like being buried alive. Outside, the November sky was the color of wet concrete. Sophie waved at me from her car seat in Mark's SUV, pigtails bouncing, completely unaware that the judge had just drawn a line down the middle of her childhood. I waved back until the car turned the corner. Then I got in my 10-year-old Civic with the cracked dashboard and drove to the studio apartment that still smelled like fresh paint and nobody's cooking. That night I sat on the floor. No couch yet, and opened the one box I'd brought from the house that wasn't clothes or kitchen stuff. Inside, Sophie's baby book, our wedding album, the silly World's Best Mom mug Mark gave me the first Mother's Day after she was born. I drank cheap wine from that mug and scrolled to Tyler's last message, the one he'd sent the day he forwarded my voicemail to Mark's lawyer. "Tyler, I'm really sorry, Isoria, but I have to think about my own family." I deleted the thread, blocked the number. For the first time, it didn't even hurt, because nothing could hurt worse than the supervised visit schedule printed on thick county letterhead, taped to my empty fridge like a death sentence, with smiley face stickers. Mark got the house, the dog, the friends, the life we built. He got bedtime stories and homemade pancakes and someone new who will never make him beg to be chosen. I got freedom. It tastes like the inside of a courtroom, and the sound of my daughter calling someone else's name when she's scared at night. Some prisons have bars. Mine has a visitation log and a social worker sign-off. And every other Saturday at 10 a.m., I get to remember exactly how much my freedom cost the only person who never asked to pay for it. Sophie deserved better. Turns out Mark did too. And the woman who thought she was suffocating, she's the one who can't breathe now